to TikTok at 1080, which is a considerable amount less. So now our CPU load is at 46% as far as the stream is concerned, and our upload rate for the internet still around 20 megs, it looks like, or actually 18, no longer 20. So we'll see some spikes and we should get better performance. Our memory is at 30 gigabytes right now. Let's go try this again. We should have a smoother experience than what was going on. All right, now we're back in. Yeah, it was quite laggy. I'm assuming it was quite laggy. Why does it say it's offline? Well, obviously online. Okay, now we're back. All right, so how much RAM do we have? I have 64 gigabytes of DDR4. Let's go into the game. Now we have all my settings down for the game. CPU is running at 58% or so. Remember before, for the last stream, it was full load, 100% usage. My Ethernet upload speed was at 20 megabytes per second. Now it's down to about 10. That means I'm probably loading around 7,000 to 7,700. Let me double check. No, I'm at 9 megabytes per second upload, with it really topping around 8,700 megabytes, or 87 megabytes per second. All right, we haven't lost any frames. We're running at 60 frames per second. All right, the game it's a lot more stable. We're still having some drops to 37, but I'm assuming that's just because it's loading right now. Usually when I'm uploading like this, I don't have any, but I am also generally using the GPU upload, which, you know, we'll go back and forth to see which one looks better as far as use case scenario. When I dual stream, I usually set one to software codec and then one to GPU codec, the H4 whatever it's called. We had a little frame spike or frame drop down to 25 frames per second. We're bouncing around with the lower end being around 55 frames FPS, and the top end being 60. It's barely more stable than it was, all things considered. We're still topping the GPU out pretty high, or not the GPU, the CPU. We could take a look at what that looks like as far as the load is concerned across all the cores, which I'll take a look at right now. But before you could even see it as a graph or spikes. It was just all lit up all the way, and it was 100% utilization just the entire time. Right, this is obviously on performance mode, 60 frames per second. Now if I turn this up, I'm probably going to get a little bit more load on the GPU, obviously, and a little bit more load on the CPU, but it's a lot more stable than it was when I tried to do this at 4K stream output. Yeah, so our lower end now is about 74 it looks like, 60 top end, topping out at 120, usually hanging out by 119 frames per second for gameplay. You're getting it at 60 frames per second because YouTube doesn't, you know, handle anything more than that, from what I understand. Let's move it around. When I turned this to 60, we got our CPU, it ran up to about 80 to 90% utilization across cores, with it looks like to be about 6 cores being maxed out on 12, or 6 threads I should say. Well, we knew that was going to happen because I'm just jerking around. But let's spectate, because this is a good opportunity to see what's going on as well. So we could turn up the settings here. I'm going to drop it down to 60. This is what I usually look at because my monitors don't handle anything more than 60. So for me, visually speaking, it's not really worth anything else. We're going to hit auto set and we're just going to let it do its thing. And we'll take a look at what that looks like as far as ability. Hit apply and we can go back again. It's going to be a much prettier experience. We're still at 84% utilization on the CPU. It's actually less when I have it drop down to 60 frames per second. So we got about 10% more performance of just locking it in at 60, and a much higher fidelity experience than just trying to max out frame rate. GPU sitting at 57%. Network speed remains to be 8 and 10 megabytes per second. Again, you know, the upload rate is about 88 megs per second to YouTube. So you're not really getting much more about trying to just pump out frames. You're not getting a better experience. I'm going to assume that this is looking much better on YouTube's end from what I could tell. Have to look at it a little bit closer. And we could go ahead and put the gameplay front and center. Desktop 2. Go big screen mode. We can hide that for a second. Now it might get choppy when I take it off because it's going to do what Fortnite does, which is a drop in frame rate. There's a little bit of a stutter there when I switched over, but I think that's part of the course. We haven't dropped any frames. Remaining about 88 megabytes per second on the upload. CPU sitting at about 100% utilization as it streams information in. Epic, ever so often now, as this character's running around, you're getting more and more utilization, but I'm also using software encoding. So the next part of this, I'm going to switch to GPU encoding. It's supposed to not provide a large hit on the performance. However, I would disagree with that assertion, as I've noticed about a 10 to 15% hit in performance when doing this sort of stuff. Alright, so let me just drop it. Let's see if I can get back into the same stream. Sometimes it doesn't like it when I change certain aspects of it. Alright, well, off stream it dropped down to 37. We're going to be climbing back up a little bit. Most of our load is going to go onto the GPU now. Wait for it to get, or YouTube to get back on. Alright, so YouTube is definitely back on. Now the GPU encoder is going to be a much more performant encoder, especially on the CPU. I'll bring back up my task manager. Get that in real time. We'll put the game back in focus so that it's processing how it normally was. So at 30 frames per second, it was down to 30%. On the GPU, now it's at 60% at 60 frames per second. Our CPU went down from 100% utilization with software encoding down to about 50% utilization. It's got a much more stable picture as well as a higher graphic fidelity in this mode. Memory's still around 32 gigs, that's pretty normal. Upload rate is fluctuating between 8 and looks like 11 depending on assets being streamed in at the time. This is other players, skins, textures, that sort of thing. Let me get the chart out of the way. We can load back up into another match to further illustrate what's going on. So it isn't necessary to, if you're streaming, it's only necessary for your gameplay to turn it up to 120 frames per second. You're going to lose a lot of performance just maxing it out. So we're going to do that on this next gameplay. Might as well, oh well, we'll wait till this loads. We're going to do that on this gameplay. You might get a somewhat smoother experience, but I imagine you're going to be hard pressed to really be able to tell with your naked eye, as that stuffing 120 frames per second into a 60 frame per second container is only beneficial if you're really just being able to skip frames. So now the game is running, and it depends on if your game can handle it. Right now I'm at 95 to 100, with the lower end being about 70 to 64. We're going to drop this down to be more performant as far as visual quality. I guess we'll wait till we load into the game because we're going to drop down the effects, textures, that sort of thing being loaded into memory. It's probably going to take a little bit of load off the GPU as we went up from about 55 to 60, now up to about 72. Well, let's drop and then we'll see what it gets up to, as high as we can get it up to as far as what it's doing. It's not that much. It's not, you know, CPU drop went up about, looks like 12%. We're not even reaching 120 frames per second. I know this can because I have played it at 120 frames per second. It's an offline, you know. Down here. Get this going. We're gonna drop down the graphics to all the way down to potato. Alright, so we should be reaching the upper ends 114, top end being 120. That's the same changes. I can't see the difference on my screen because, again, my screen is at 60 frames per second. I'm noticing a little bit of screen tearing on my screen. I'm not sure if that's coming through on your side, but on my screen. frames, and I got sucked into being stupid. We'll take a look at this. We're going to spectate for a second and watch what's going on. So for me, it doesn't really add that much excitement to what's going on. It might be marginally smoother, but I am again knowing some frame tearing. I will take a look back at the gameplay on YouTube when I download this to make the final video. Now you can, if you really want to, for your benefit, to run it at the higher frame rates, but as far as streaming goes, you're not really getting anything extra out of it. And from the look of it that I'm looking at right now, I would imagine not getting much out of it on your side. You can see my mouse. I didn't realize you could see my mouse. Yeah, I can see the frame tearing right around in this area on the stream. Nothing too crazy, and it doesn't happen too often, but I am noticing it about in this area. I don't think I'm noticing anything else. Something going on down here in this area. This is one way around. Usually it's across the stream, but again, I'm super sensitive to this and it bothers my eyeballs. Let's move it back to a lower frame rate and let's see what that looks like at the low settings. It's just me and maybe my own preference, but I can tell already on the stream that there is a bigger difference, a more smoother and cleaner difference than that, than having it just jump around frame rates. So unless you got like a 4090 in there and they're just pumping out full frames consistently, then I can't imagine that you're getting anything more out of this. Yeah, that looks a lot better already. Alright, let's turn back on. Turn back on the auto settings. And usually I'll change some settings to make it more stable. Like, I don't really need view distance to be epic. Effects to be epic. Post-processing. I'm going to turn that down to medium. Sometimes I turn it off completely, but ready up one more time, see what those frame rates, because I can't see the frame counter look like. And that wasn't even in focus until I hit the ready up button. Notice that little hiccup when I press ready up. That means it wasn't in focus and it's switching to 60 frames per second. And it dropped down to about 40% load on the GPU. Now it's up to about 5560. Ethernet stayed the same because it's not going to change. Memory went up about 2 gigs, so instead of being at 20, we're at 30, we're at 32 now. GPU utilization went up about 15%. But this means that we have overhead to do other stuff if we want to. You gotta think about your studio effects, your notifications, what you're loading into memory, and your scenes. There's a lot more stuff than just the gameplay and things that are going into what you're doing other than just the gameplay. So now if I do something like add my camera, we're going to add more overhead to that. So I'm just going to put my crappy camera on. Now this is using a background removal. So that should actually raise what's going on just a bit, but let's see what that looks like when I put it back in focus. And actually that didn't raise it up that much. We went up 5%, if that, on CPU. 32, we're still at 32 megs or 32 gigabytes on memory, and maybe 2% on GPU. And my camera is set at a 4K, so you should be getting it really clean, really clear. I'm looking kind of, pale on stream because I haven't been outside in a while. I'm gonna go to the grass. My head's really big, but that's fine. As far as frame timing reports, we're hitting those about, it's like 50, highs of 60. Right now we're stabled out at 60. And here inside in the house, because there's a bunch of stuff to draw. Did I just jump off that guy? Oh, I died. Anyways, but you get the point. But we could take a look at this and watch it some more. Just gonna take what's going on here. We have a much more stable situation at the lower end than we do just bouncing around. To me, it looks like a cleaner presentation. And my camera at 4K input, we're only outputting at 1080p, so it's downsampling. So my camera looks great. So that might be something worth considering since the performance it doesn't seem to be that large. But we could also test that further. I can remove the Logitech Brio from the scene. Remove that. We can add the virtual camera from NVIDIA Broadcast. Right now it's going to show up like that on the screen. Corner there. Open up NVIDIA Broadcast. This one uses the GPU to remove the background. It's using RTX cores. I'm not using any RTX features on Fortnite right now, so in theory it should. Camera source is busy, so let's find the camera. This camera. Remove this camera. Remove. Alright, retry. There we go. Scene. Close that down. Refresh this. Alright. Now we can open up Logitech camera. We can try it 30 frames per second. Remove background. Now I'm using this at the 4K level. I don't know how well it's going to do. Or if it's going to want to do it at all.
Bad when I talk to you.
Alright, yeah, it doesn't even look like it wants to do that right now. Alright, there we go. So we got it working. Let's see what that does to our performance. So that actually takes a good hit on the CPU. So that brought that up from 50 to about 75% utilization, which I didn't even realize it was going to do because it's supposed to be all GPU. The GPU went from 50, it was like a 6% increase on GPU, so it's not too bad. Looks like we're still maintaining pretty stable frame rates. We're ready up again. We're back over here, get some frame dropping, and we'll see. We'll take a look at that frame rate graph. There's a way to do it with Windows. Let's see what that frame rate graph looks like. See if I can pull that up. So it says we're hitting about 67 frames per second, which I don't know how because we're locked in at 60, but okay. Inside the game right now. With that virtual camera on, we're actually noticing a bit of performance degradation with the virtual camera set to as high as it is. So that's going to be looking like the biggest hit in performance. Because right now we're bouncing all over the place. We're 24 frames per second. Our top end is 50 frames per second. We're set up. We should be set up to be constrained to 60. Hit VSync. See if that doesn't generally help, but what I'm trying to do is just lock it to the. So we're gonna notice some errors. Yeah, and just I can see it on stream, and I can see it. But the camera seems to take the biggest hit. It'd probably be better to reduce that output since we don't need a 4K camera. Let's bring up broadcast. We're going to drop that down to 1920 or 1080. In the settings, we're going to refresh that and see what our so that drops down utilization on the CPU. And let's see what our frame rates look like now. So we're hitting that top end that we were locked before, 60 with it drops down to about, let's get it stabled out first. Looks like it drops to about 50, so it's still bouncing around. The furthest drop I'm seeing is 39 frames per second. So the camera could probably even be dropped further if we wanted to. We could drop that down to, let's see, drop that down to, we'll leave it on 1080, but we'll drop it down to 30 frames per second. Alright, so now that bottom end just standing here, moving around. 57 frames per second. So that's a much better experience for people watching. Much better experience for yourself as you're playing. You get to keep the graphic fidelity tuned pretty high. The game doesn't look like mush. And there's a bunch of jaggies all over the screen. I'm assuming that once you get into more populated areas like Crime City, that you're going to lose some performance. So let's try to get over there real quick and see if we can get into a little city area. Anything with a lot of geometry, a bunch of stuff to draw, it's taxing. It's going to be taxing on your system. But I can already see on my CPU that we're down to 55% utilization opposed to being at 70%. And that's just the virtual camera. So even though it says it's not supposed to be a huge performance hit, obviously it is. So you have to have a pretty beefy CPU to get the most out of that virtual camera NVIDIA broadcasts, which seems to be counterintuitive given that it's supposed to be a GPU related feature. But hey, you know, that's how it goes sometimes. But this is, yeah, so we're noticing FPS here in the city dropping to 44. Let's go see what happens when we go into the bank. Where's that guy at? Oh, okay. So anyways, we're still seeing some frame drops, much more manageable experience. Fine-tune it. Much nicer if we drop certain quality presets. And we got TSRs going, which is a good way. We could drop down the shadows down to high, ambient inclusion. We could turn that off if we wanted to. Keep it on. We could turn off screen space, reflections, textures. Really just going to be probably turn down the effects to medium. Probably get a much better experience. Did you come and beat up the pickle? That's rude. So now we're still locked in on Fortnite. We barely even got any extra performance out of that. Let's see what it looks like in game though. Those small tweaks, but it might be enough just to deal with what's going on. I noticed the built-in background removal on XSplit is probably more performant than the GPU enabled NVIDIA broadcast. And right now, with everyone here, we're still dropping frames. So I think the biggest eater of performance right now is actually more the NVIDIA broadcast software. So I think you could actually change how performing that is as well. They used to have it where you could set up how performing it was, but that does not look to be the case anymore. Let's see what we got, what we have going on. Well, yeah, it depends on your setup, but you're, you know, streaming out 120 frames, you're not going to get any extra look to your stream. Turning up the resolution and having that downscale to the platform that you're on is going to be the most beneficial thing you can do for the look of your stream, along with making sure that certain system hog let's get this together. Come on. Oh, no. Oh, right in the face. So anyways, that's it for that. I'm going to get off. I was just testing some stuff. I'll be back on TikTok later and playing some games later tonight as per usual. Alright, catch you guys. Take care. I did this publicly. I meant to